In the harsh territory of Wyoming, where survival often trumps morality, the true measure of humanity is revealed not in prosperity, but in how we treat those who cannot defend themselves. Please support our small channel with your subscription. Your support motivates us to create more Wild West stories. Thank you. The dusty main street of Redwood Gulch bakes under the merciless afternoon sun as a crowd gathers around the most shameful spectacle the hound has witnessed in years. A blind woman stands perfectly still in the center of it all, her worn calico dress modest despite its patches, her unseeing eyes fixed straight ahead with quiet dignity that makes the scene all the more heartbreaking. 50 cents for a good woman who can cook and clean, shouts her drunken husband, Jack Crow, his voice slurred with whiskey and desperation. The stench of alcohol and unwashed clothes clings to him like a second skin. She cannot see, but her hands work fine. What am I bid? The townspeople shuffle their boots in the dirt, some looking away in disgust while others lean forward with the morbid curiosity of vultures circling carrion. Women clutch their shawls tighter and whisper behind gloved hands, while men stroke their beards and consider the wretched proposition with calculating eyes. Caleb Thorne stands in the shadow of the Silver Dollar Saloon, his weathered hands clenched into fists at his sides. At 42, he has seen enough cruelty in his years ranching the harsh Wyoming territory, but this display of human degradation cuts him deeper than a winter wind. His dark eyes burn with righteous anger as bidders begin calling out their pathetic offers like she was livestock at market. $2, calls out old Pete Morrison. $5, shouts another voice from the crowd. The woman never flinches, never speaks, but Caleb can see the barely perceptible tremor in her hands. Without a word, he steps forward through the crowd, pulls his leather wallet from his vest pocket, and throws it at the drunk man, his feet. $50, he says quietly, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. And my word that this ends here. Jack Crow snatches up the wallet with greedy fingers, his bloodshot eyes wide with disbelief at the unexpected windfall. He counts the bills twice before stuffing them into his grimy coat pocket, already stumbling toward the saloon doors without a backward glance at the woman he has just sold like cattle. Caleb approaches the woman slowly, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden planks of the boardwalk. He removes his worn Stetson hat and clears his throat gently. My name is Caleb Thorne. I have a ranch about 5 miles west of here. You are welcome to come with me, if you are willing. She turns her head toward the sound of his voice, and for the first time, he sees her face clearly. Despite the hardship etched in the lines around her eyes, she possesses a quiet beauty that speaks of inner strength rather than fragile prettiness. Her auburn hair, though simply braided, catches the late afternoon light like burnished copper. I can walk, she says firmly, her voice carrying a slight tremor that she fights to control. I do not need to be carried like baggage. I would not dream of it, Caleb replies with genuine respect. He offers his arm, but she straightens her shoulders and steps away from his gesture, choosing instead to walk beside his horse with her head held high. They leave Redwood Gulch behind as the sun begins its descent toward the western mountains, painting the vast prairie in shades of gold and crimson. The woman walks with surprising sureness despite her blindness, occasionally stumbling on uneven ground but never accepting help when Caleb offers it. Her pride is fierce and unbroken, like a wild Mustang that has learned to endure captivity but never to submit. The Cedar Valley Ranch appears on the horizon as twilight settles over the land, its sturdy wooden buildings and neat corrals speaking of prosperity earned through honest labor. Smoke rises from the chimney of the main house, and cattle low softly in the distance, creating a peaceful symphony that seems to ease some of the tension from the woman's rigid posture. This is home, Caleb says quietly as they approach the front porch. The interior of the ranch house speaks of a man who values function over decoration, yet everything is kept meticulously clean and orderly. Heavy wooden furniture built to last generations fills the main room, while a stone fireplace dominates one wall, its hearth blackened by countless winter evenings. The woman stands just inside the doorway, her hands clasped before her, taking in the unfamiliar sounds and scents of what Caleb hopes will become her sanctuary. There is a room upstairs that gets the morning sun, Caleb offers carefully, setting his hat on a wooden peg by the door. But tonight, if you prefer, there is a comfortable chair by the fire. I will not presume to tell you where you should rest. She nods silently, then begins to move through the room with deliberate steps, her fingertips trailing along the back of the leather sofa, memorizing its position and texture. Caleb watches her create a mental map of his home, noting how she pauses at each piece of furniture, each doorway, building a world through touch and sound where sight cannot guide her. Over the following days, she explores every corner of the house with methodical precision. Caleb observes her routine from a respectful distance, making small adjustments to help her navigation. He ensures the coffee pot always sits in the same spot on the kitchen counter, leaves the wooden chairs pushed under the dining table at precise angles, and carves small notches into the porch railing to serve as landmarks for her fingers. Their initial silence, born of mutual wariness, gradually transforms into something more comfortable. She begins helping with household tasks without being asked, washing dishes with practiced efficiency and mending his torn shirts with stitches so neat they put his own clumsy repairs to shame. Her hands, he notices, move with the confidence of someone who has learned to see through touch, feeling for loose buttons and frayed seams with an expertise that comes from years of necessity. When Caleb suggests she might prefer the upstairs bedroom to sleeping on the makeshift bed he arranged near the fireplace, she accepts without argument. It is a small victory, he thinks, this sign that she is beginning to trust his respect for her independence and dignity. The house, which has been his solitary refuge for so many years, slowly begins to feel different. Not invaded, but somehow more complete, as if it had always been waiting for someone else to call it home. 3 weeks after her arrival, the woman surprises Caleb by asking for clay pots and seeds. She stands on the front porch in the early morning light, her face turned toward the warmth of the rising sun, and explains that she once kept a small herb garden behind the boarding house where she lived before her marriage to Jack Crow. "I can smell when the soil needs water," she says with quiet confidence, running her fingers through the earth he brings her in a wooden crate. "And I can feel when the plants are healthy or struggling. It is not magic, just attention to things that most people ignore." Caleb watches her work with fascination as she plants sage, lavender, and chamomile in the clay vessels, her movements sure and deliberate. Within days, she has created a small aromatic sanctuary on the covered porch, the herbs releasing their fragrances into the morning air like a natural blessing on their shared space. Inspired by her success, Caleb spends a Sunday afternoon building her a proper raised garden bed near the kitchen window, where she can tend her plants with dignity rather than crouching over makeshift containers. She runs her hands over the smooth wooden edges he has carefully sanded, and he sees the first genuine smile cross her face since her arrival. Their daily routines begin to interweave like the branches of cottonwood trees growing side by side. She mends his work shirts while he sharpens her kitchen knives, creating intimacy through small acts of care rather than words or physical touch. She learns the rhythm of his day, having coffee ready when he returns from the morning chores, while he ensures her herb garden receives the afternoon shade it needs by adjusting the porch awning. One evening, during a fierce thunderstorm that rattles the windows and sends rain hammering against the roof, she breaks their comfortable quiet with an unexpected confession. "I used to sing," she says, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Before I lost my sight, I sang in the church choir. But afterward, the songs seemed to die in my throat." Caleb sets down his leather work and listens as she continues. "Lately, though, I find myself humming while I work in the garden. It surprises me each time, like finding wildflowers in winter. I sing too," he admits, his voice rough with emotion. "Old cowboy ballads, mostly, when I am working alone in the barn. My voice is not much to speak of, but the horses do not seem to mind. They share a moment of mutual understanding, two souls who have found small ways to reclaim joy after loss." 2 months pass like the gentle flow of the creek that runs through Cedar Valley, bringing with them the subtle changes of early autumn. The woman has never spoken her name, and Caleb has never pressed her for it, understanding that some wounds heal better when left unbandaged. She has become simply part of the fabric of ranch life, as natural and necessary as the morning coffee or the evening feeding of the livestock. On a particularly peaceful morning, as golden light streams through the kitchen window and the scent of her chamomile tea mingles with the aroma of fresh biscuits, she breaks the comfortable silence with a question that catches Caleb off guard. "May I stay here permanently?" she asks, her hands wrapped around her cup as if drawing strength from its warmth. "Not as a burden or a charity case, but as someone who belongs here." Caleb sets down his coffee carefully, weighing his words like a man who understands their power. "That depends entirely on whether it is truly what you want, not what you feel you owe me or what seems safest. I will not have you stay out of gratitude or fear." She turns her face toward his voice, and he can see her considering his words with the same careful attention she gives to her herbs. "I have been thinking about this for weeks," she says finally. "I do not want to stay because you rescued me from that terrible day, though I am grateful. I want to stay because this place feels like somewhere I can grow something worthwhile, not just survive." The sincerity in her voice moves him more than any declaration of love could. This is not the desperate clinging of someone seeking shelter, but the considered choice of a woman who has found her place in the world. "Then yes," he says quietly. "This is your home, for as long as you want it to be." She reaches across the table with careful deliberation, her fingertips finding the fabric of his shirt sleeve. It is not a grab for support or a gesture born of desperation, but a gentle connection between two people who have learned to see each other clearly despite the shadows that once clouded their vision. Together, they sit in the morning light, watching the sun paint the prairie in shades of gold and amber. The house around them no longer feels like his sanctuary or her refuge, but their shared haven. She begins to name things in her own way, not with words but through the textures of worn wood and the sounds of familiar footsteps, creating an intimate map of their world together. The letter arrives on a Tuesday morning with the weekly mail delivery, bearing the seal of a medical practice in Denver. Caleb reads it twice before setting it aside, his coffee growing cold as he wrestles with an unexpected dilemma. Dr. Edmund Hayes, a specialist in diseases of the eye, believes he may be able to restore sight to those who have lost it through certain types of injury or illness. For 3 days, Caleb carries the letter in his vest pocket, pulling it out to reread whenever he finds himself alone in the barn or walking the fence lines. He watches her tend her herbs with such practiced grace, moving through their shared world with complete confidence, and wonders if offering this possibility might seem like he finds her current state lacking. Finally, on Friday evening as they sit on the porch listening to the evening song of meadowlarks, he finds the courage to speak. "There is something I need to tell you about," he begins carefully, his voice tight with uncertainty. "A doctor in Denver has written to several ranchers, looking for people who might benefit from a new treatment for blindness." She grows very still, her hands pausing in their gentle stroking of the barn cat that has adopted her as its favorite human. "You think I need to be fixed," she says quietly, and there is hurt in her voice that cuts him deeper than any blade. "No," he says urgently, leaning forward in his chair. "I think you are perfect exactly as you are. But I also think you deserve to have every choice available to you, even if you decide against it." She is silent for a long time, her face turned toward the setting sun as if trying to remember what light looked like. When she finally speaks, her voice is heavy with old fears. "What if I can see again, but the world I have built here in the darkness disappears? What if sight makes me someone different, someone who no longer fits in this life we have created?" Caleb reaches over and gently covers her hand with his own, the first deliberate touch they have shared. "Then we will build a new life that fits whoever you become. But the choice must be entirely yours." After 2 weeks of careful consideration, she agrees to make the journey to Denver, trusting that Caleb will stay beside her through whatever comes. The surgery is more successful than even Dr. Hayes dared hope, and when the bandages are removed, she sees Caleb's face for the first time, marveling that he looks exactly as her heart had imagined him through his kindness and strength. The return to Cedar Valley Ranch proves more challenging than either of them anticipated. The woman finds herself caught between two worlds, torn between the confident, capable person she had become in darkness and the uncertain, overwhelmed individual she feels like with sight restored. Colors seem too bright, distances confusing, and the familiar spaces of their home look nothing like the mental map she had so carefully constructed. She stumbles over furniture she had navigated perfectly for months, misjudges the height of steps she had climbed countless times, and finds herself reaching for walls that appear closer than they actually are. The frustration brings tears to her newly seeing eyes, and she often closes them deliberately, trying to reclaim the sureness she had lost. Caleb watches her struggle with patient understanding, speaking more often now to provide the verbal cues she had relied upon, reminding her gently that she carries both kinds of sight within her now. "You have not lost what you learned in the darkness," he tells her during a particularly difficult morning when she knocks over her favorite teacup. "You are simply adding new skills to the ones you already possess." Their first trip to town since her surgery becomes an ordeal neither had expected. The visual stimulation of the busy Main Street overwhelms her, and she finds herself dizzy from trying to process so much information at once. Worse still are the stares and whispered conversations of the townspeople, who gawk at her miraculous recovery as if she were a curiosity in a traveling show rather than a human being deserving of dignity. "Look there, it is the blind woman who can see again," she hears Mrs. Patterson whisper to her companion. They say it cost that rancher a fortune to get her fixed up. Makes you wonder what his real intentions are. That evening, sitting on their porch under a canopy of stars she can now see but had learned to know by sound and scent, she voices the confusion that has been building in her heart. "I do not know who I am anymore," she confesses, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I was someone strong and sure in the darkness, but now I feel like a child learning to walk." She pauses, then asks the question that has been haunting her. "Why have you never touched me, Caleb? Even now, after all this time together, you keep your distance as if I might break." His answer comes slowly, weighted with careful thought. "Because you deserve to choose, not to have choices made for you. You deserve time to become whoever you are meant to be, without assumptions or expectations from me." For the first time since knowing him, she reaches out deliberately, her hand finding his face in the starlight. "Then I choose this," she whispers, and they share their first kiss under the vast Wyoming sky. Spring arrives at Cedar Valley Ranch with a gentle warmth that seems to mirror the new tenderness blooming between Caleb and the woman who has finally begun to call herself by her given name, Sarah. The harsh Wyoming winter has given way to fields of wildflowers, and Sarah finds herself able to appreciate both the visual beauty of the prairie and the familiar scents and sounds that had been her guides for so long. Their courtship unfolds with the patient rhythm of the changing seasons. Caleb no longer shadows her every step, understanding that she has reclaimed her confidence by learning to blend her old skills with her new sight. They work side by side in comfortable partnership, he tending the cattle while she expands her herb garden into neat rows of medicinal plants that she plans to sell to the town doctor. The people of Redwood Gulch gradually accept their union, though not without the occasional raised eyebrow or whispered speculation. Most of the townspeople have come to respect Caleb's integrity over the years, and they can see that Sarah has transformed from the broken woman who was auctioned in their street into someone who carries herself with quiet dignity and purpose. However, not everyone approves of their arrangement. Mrs. McDonald, the banker's wife and self-appointed guardian of town morality, makes pointed comments about proper courtship and questionable living arrangements whenever Sarah ventures into the general store. But even she cannot deny the obvious contentment that radiates from both Caleb and Sarah when they appear together at church on Sunday mornings. Their peaceful existence faces its first real threat when Sheriff Williams rides out to the ranch on a humid afternoon in late May, his expression grim beneath the brim of his hat. He dismounts slowly, as if reluctant to deliver his news, and accepts Caleb's offer of coffee with the gravity of a man carrying unwelcome tidings. "Jack Crow is back in town," he announces without preamble, watching Sarah's face carefully for her reaction. "Showed up 3 days ago, drunk as a skunk and meaner than a rattlesnake. He has been asking questions about his wife, demanding to know where you took his property." Sarah remains perfectly calm, but her hand still slightly as she sets down her sewing. "I was never Jack Crow's property," she says quietly, her voice steady with conviction. "I was never anyone's property, and I never will be again." Caleb's jaw tightens, but he keeps his voice level. "What does he want?" "He claims you stole what belongs to him," the sheriff continues. "Says he never agreed to sell her permanent, just rent her out for a while. Of course, half the town saw the transaction, but Jack is not thinking too clear these days." Sarah stands and moves to the window, gazing out at the peaceful valley that has become her sanctuary. "Let him come," she says firmly. "I am not the same person he sold in that street." The confrontation comes on a scorching Tuesday afternoon, unfolding in front of Henderson's general store where half the town has gathered for the weekly supply wagon. Jack Crow stands swaying in the dusty street, his clothes even more ragged than before, his eyes wild with drink and desperation. When he spots Sarah walking beside Caleb, his face contorts with rage and possessive fury. "There she is," he shouts, pointing an unsteady finger in their direction. "That is my wife, and I want her back. You had no right to keep what belongs to me, Thorne." The crowd parts like water around a stone as Caleb and Sarah approach, their steps measured and dignified despite the ugly scene unfolding before them. Sarah has dressed carefully for this moment, wearing her best blue dress and holding her head high with the bearing of a woman who knows her own worth. "I never belonged to you, Jack Crow," Sarah says clearly, her voice carrying across the silent street. You sold me like livestock, and I was bought by a man who gave me something you never did. The choice to be free. Jack's face grows purple with fury. You are my legal wife. The preacher said them words over us, and that makes you mine until death do us part. I never bought her. Caleb interjects, his voice calm but carrying the steel of absolute conviction. I bought her freedom. There is a considerable difference, though I do not expect a man like you to understand it. The townspeople murmur among themselves, some nodding in agreement while others shuffle uncomfortably. Sheriff Williams steps forward from the crowd, his hand resting casually on the butt of his revolver. Now see here, Jack, the sheriff says with deceptive mildness. You took money for this woman fair and square. Half the town witnessed it. Far as the law is concerned, you got no claim on her anymore. Jack's hand moves toward the rusty pistol tucked into his belt, but the sheriff's weapon clears leather faster than a striking snake. I would not advise that course of action, Williams says quietly. This lady has made her choice clear, and the law supports a woman's right to choose her own path. Faced with the sheriff, his drawn gun, and the obvious disapproval of the gathered crowd, Jack backs down with the cowardice that has always defined him. This ain't over, he snarls, but his retreat is already assured. Yes, it is, Sarah says with finality. It ended the day I walked away from everything you represented. Jack stumbles toward his horse, muttering curses and threats that carry no weight. As he rides out of Redwood Gulch, Sarah feels the last chains of her past fall away like autumn leaves. 3 weeks after Jack Crow's final departure from their lives, Sarah surprises Caleb with a proposal as they sit watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. She reaches into her apron pocket and produces a simple gold band that had belonged to her grandmother, the only thing of value she had managed to keep through all her trials. I want to marry you, she says simply, placing the ring in his calloused palm. Not because I owe you my freedom, and not because I need your protection. I want to marry you because you taught me that love is not about ownership, but about choosing each other every single day. Caleb stares at the ring, his throat tight with emotion he struggles to express. Are you certain? There is no hurry, Sarah. We have all the time in the world. I have never been more certain of anything, she replies, her eyes bright with the confidence that has grown stronger with each passing day. You were the first person to truly see me, even when I could not see myself. You remain the clearest thing in my vision. Their wedding takes place beneath the sprawling oak tree that shades the ranch house, with Reverend Patterson officiating before a small gathering of neighbors and friends. Even Mrs. McDonald attends, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief as she witnesses the obvious love between the couple. Sarah wears her mended green dress from the day of her arrival, transformed now from a symbol of her brokenness into a testament to her resilience. Caleb stands beside her in his Sunday best, his usually unruly hair neatly combed and his face shining with quiet joy. Their vows are simple but profound, spoken in voices meant only for each other despite the assembled witnesses. When Caleb promises to honor her independence as much as their partnership, Sarah's eyes fill with tears of gratitude. When she pledges to build a life with him based on choice rather than circumstance, his voice catches with emotion. The celebration that follows is modest but heartfelt, with music provided by old Pete Morrison, his fiddle and dancing that continues until the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. As the evening winds down and their guests depart, Caleb and Sarah stand hand in hand on their porch, no longer carrying the weight of fear but only the lightness of hope. Thank you, Sarah whispers, her head resting against his shoulder as they watch the last wagon disappear into the darkness. For what? He asks, his arm tightening gently around her waist. For showing me that being seen and being free can be the same thing. Together, they turn toward their home, their future, and their love.